Hello and welcome to another recording of the SEO Huddle. Familiar faces with me today are Jerry and Cindy, and a new face to the unstructured chaos, Alfie. Alfie, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me on, Dan. I'm delighted to join you from a coffee shop in London with my mocha.
You say that now, let's see if you still say that in 30 minutes' time. So
We'll see.
Today we're going to be discussing some of the topics that have sprung up in SEO and the kind of a wider digital arena over the last couple of weeks. If we could predict the future, we would not be doing this on YouTube. And we're going to try not to incite any kind of American presidential debate today, Jerry. So today we're going to be kicking off with the srsltid parameter, which is causing confusion, Slack conversations, X conversations everywhere. Jerry, do you want to pick this one up?
Yeah, this was a bit of a strange one. Dan and I were looking at a big e-commerce website, and one of the things that I kind of noticed was the fact there was loads of parameters on loads of the URLs, kind of this parameter basically, and I'm kind of going, oh, this is really weird. The odd thing is Dan wasn't getting the same parameter, and that kind of caused the first bit of confusion. I was like, oh, must be a plugin, a Chrome plugin. We started looking around, started Googling it, and it turns out this is happening to everybody everywhere, and people are questioning John Mueller, people are questioning what it is, why it's there. And it seems like a merchant center thing. Basically, Google is saying, you know, where we've got the same products URL for a merchant center kind of URL and a normal listing, will kind of inject the product listing one into the normal standard kind of organic results. Now, that sounds fine. What could possibly go wrong, except for the fact that suddenly we're having another parameter put into URLs, and clients are kind of getting confused because they're turning around and saying, you told us we should have clean URLs and we shouldn't have tracking parameters on our kind of organic, and now suddenly they're here. And so people are asking a lot of questions. And the other kind of side of it, of course, is the fact that we try to make the internet as fast as possible. One of the things that we try to do is make sure that we don't have things that break caches. And we all know that every single parameter, every single thing like that, unless it's handled correctly, it kind of actually effectively slows down the internet. I've spent a bit of time and a little bit of energy kind of working with a couple of customers in the past where we actually worked out all the parameters and actually saved thousands, in fact, like tens of thousands of pounds by improving like CDN management and stuff. But yeah, so the only question I have almost is the fact, how does this impact analytics?
Well, that's one of the main flags for both Jerry and I kind of saw this, that our favorite analytics tool on the market right now, GA4,
Adobe,
not to be able to process this completely, because one of the things that we saw and I've seen with this is where this is being served as a parameter in organic search, GA4 is not picking up as organic session. It's picking up as paid in sort of media space. But obviously, Search Console is still functioning like Search Console does. So that's causing the analytics confusion, reporting confusion, right? Basically misattribution of sessions, misattribution of revenue, misattribution of every other event trigger that you're tracking. John Mueller has, to be fair, probably come out and said as much as he can through the Google PR machine, because technically it isn't affecting crawling or indexing. It's just that Google is serving the parameterized version within the SERPs, and that's causing the analytics chaos. And one thing which makes it even more confusing is that there are 56 and 59 character strings on these parameter URLs, and I can't remember which one it is. Search Console only picks up one of them and doesn't pick up the other. So you're not actually getting the full data set anywhere on how much this is being affected, other than one graph is going down and the other graph isn't.
So this is clearly a mistake, right? Like this is just a boo-boo.
I think, in my opinion, it's the classic Google thing where somebody does something over here, doesn't tell that person over there. This comes in here and nobody thinks about the consequences. We have this image of Google being this small team of exceptional professionals who are all talking to each other and they all know what they're doing. When the reality is that Google is a huge company who, you know, there's teams working on projects over here, there's teams working on things, and they're not all kind of synced up, and nobody knows what's happening over here, there, and everywhere, because it's so siloed and it's so chaotic almost that if, you know, whenever you speak to people at Google, it's always fun to find out that they have no idea. I saw that conversation where people were confused by the fact that there are people at Google who don't know what SEO is, and we're sort of sitting there kind of going, well, of course they don't know, because, you know, it's it's not really how they talk. It's not really what they do. Their job is speeding up delivery of results in this area or doing something particular. And I think we have this opinion that everybody at Google does everything, and it's just not the way companies like that work. But yeah, I think it's a bit of a screw up, and I think what the biggest problem is the miscommunication. They do this thing where they kind of do something, and then people like us kind of go, "What just happened? Why is this happening? Why is the analytics? Sorry, why is the ranking tool like we've Systrix, and Systrix suddenly is saying, oh, your URLs are changing. You've got canonicalization issues, or something similar to that, you know."
So someone at Merchant Center presumably was like, hey, I have a bright idea. Let's track this stuff. Let's just throw a tracking code on the end. And they just did it without checking with anyone else.
Probably. I mean, if we put the conspiracy theorist hat on and we go to the conversation we was having in a WhatsApp chat with Jono, he did highlight that Facebook did this a few years ago with FB click parameters when they started appending them to all the outbound links. That seems a bit sneaky. For obviously tracking and conversion purpose. Would Google do that? Not necessarily. This feels more like a boo-boo than it does an intentional thing, because I'd like to think Google makes boo-boos, and if they're going to do something that kind of misdemeanory, they'd be a bit more subtle with it.
I think I agree. I think they'd either be subtle with it, or they would be so bullish with it that we would know about it either way. I think this is the fact that it went under the radar, and the PR on it has been limited, means that, as we're all saying, it's a bit of a mistake. I think what's really important for SEOs now and devs now is to understand how to communicate this up, right? Because it's almost unbelievable. We've had this over the last few years, but it's just another example of it being almost unbelievable for people to report up and go, well, Google made a mistake. And how do you explain to your directors and your VPs that Google, this massive monopoly, as we are now called, now classified, how are they able to make such a mistake? And how do we explain and how can we mitigate the impact of it on reporting for a little while? Now, hopefully everybody understands how URL structures work enough to be able to identify that parameters are just that, they're parameters and they're tracking tools, and people can understand either through Looker Studio, J4, Power BI, or however they're putting together their board packs, how to do the right filters on these things and understand real world impact. But I think it speaks again to the importance of SEOs to have a technical understanding, whether they like it or not, of how domain structures work, how the internet works, and as we've been saying about the speed of the internet with the parameters and things, and to then understand how to calm this down internally. I think that's really important at the moment.
But I think even more in terms of understanding how the internet works, large companies should hopefully be using a CDN where they can set up something that will strip off the parameters before it ever hits their analytics. Hopefully, if you're not doing that, you should be, or at least you should be looking into it. I know it can be hard for some companies, but adding URL parameters is not an ideal route for tracking.
I was just thinking, I was sitting there thinking while Jerry was talking about, but so what? Why does this matter? It's like, in a nutshell, why does this matter? And it's because of, if you've got things like this, just talk to less than perfect setups, configurations, right? If you've got some kind of gap in your CDN system or in your analytics reporting or in company awareness, boo-boos like this from Google just exploit that further, right? And I think that's the so what in my opinion.
The funny thing will be if it comes full circle and then companies that have all these new URLs with parameters have a really high level soon of pages that are, known but not indexed or whatever, and they're counting against the overall domain authority or the overall domain value, the average page value, because it's like, oh, this is a duplicate page. We're like, you've just duplicated 20,000 pages, and the value of your site has gone down as a whole. Like, this is not an explicit metric. I'm not referencing anyone's explicit metrics. I'm just saying we know when you have a bunch of extra URLs that get indexed that aren't adding any value, Google doesn't like it and tends to kind of let your rankings trail off.
I mean, even if it doesn't do that, and I mean, because like I said, some of these URLs are being picked up in Search Console anyway, just because of how clunky Search Console reporting can be, in 3, 4, 5, 6 months' time, how many SEO briefs are going to be going out there for people going, oh, we've got all these new errors in Search Console. Can I pay $5,000-$10,000 for some technical consultant to come in, look at it, and fix it when there's no actual issue there? It's just for.
But if you want to hire someone, I am available.
I was just about to say that is not a problem if you want to send a brief my way. I know some excellent people I can share some workload with. But I think you're right, Jerry, and that is going to come back to in-house people understanding what's going on and understanding what is and is not a problem. I think that is so key right now.
But these things are slow. Like if I wanted to make a change to the analytics package like I used to work for a big takeaway company, huge international one. And if I turn around and says, I want to make a change to the CDN to do something, and I want to, for the analytics, because we didn't use Google Analytics, we did, but we also used other analytics packages. If I want to ignore this parameter, if I want to do this, by the time I've spoken to them, got it done, put it through the queue, got it actually actioned, actually had it tested, etc., that can take weeks. It is painfully slow at times. These companies, the bigger they are, the slower they are, and the more of their backlog. And for me to turn around and say, "Oh, I just want to make this quick change. Can I kind of get it done on Friday?" will not happen. So it is kind of risky when Google does something which can actually break serious amounts of websites if it is kind of breaking caches, if it is breaking things. And for the website that Dan and I were actually looking at one point. It was at scale. There was a huge amount of scale at which all of these URLs had suddenly changed overnight, and it's something which will cause issues. It will slow down the website, and that will cost them money, and it will cost them bandwidth. So yeah,
that problem speaks more widely as well to tracking and tagging and attribution. I mean, literally this morning I was in a call because an organization has multiple agencies that can access a tag manager, and guess what? Someone put a tag in without realizing the impact it had on another JavaScript. Your bit of JavaScript, it might look like it's only doing that tag, but it's not, and it just speaks to, that was a prime example of, we need something doing. We're going to get one of the agencies to just do it. But actually that has created more work for everybody that was involved because marketing needed to get this thing done, and they thought we could bypass the QA process, bypass the tech process. But unfortunately, as much as we all resent it, Jira tickets do exist for a reason, and I think that's stuff that you do disagree. Jira, should we just get rid of Jira tickets?
No, I totally agree with you on that one. Like 1,000,000%. I am the worst for this. I am the kind of guy that will kind of stop nodding, Dan. When the amount of things that I kind of hacked into the Google Tag Manager, is Alfie frozen? The amount of things that I kind of hacked into Google Tag Manager at various companies just to test them and do stuff. And I know that, one of the things that I did actually at one point with the help from a very famous analytics guy called Simo Abbott, I actually put the Konami code into it. So if you typed in up, down, down, left, right, BA, the whole website would do the Harlem Shake. My point is that you can do some crazy stuff in it, and you can break stuff really, really, really easily. It's a really bad hacking system thing. And it's surprising how often a paid agency will say, can you please just put this one tag on the website? And, there's 6 other tags that nobody's kind of maintaining. We're often sending data off to companies and agencies and places that actually we don't know if we've still got a professional relationship with them anymore. And it's a huge security privacy implication, especially when you're injecting JavaScript onto a website that you're not auditing and your team isn't auditing. So Alfie, completely, utterly agree with you that everything needs to go through that kind of process.
When I work with when I work with brands directly, which is about 80% of my workload, I always tell them to have an internal or a non-agency affiliated Google Tag Manager champion, because it is so important that is monitored, and Google ability to view and create reports in Google Analytics, that's fine. It's a lagging metric. Google Tag Manager is live and should not be treated in the same way. That is a message that I could not emphasize more.
No, as we're kind of going on this topic, I will also apologise to anyone watching the video version of this. Alfie appears for Frozen in 1986 with the pixelation. That is not typical of all British internet. Oh no, he's back. There we go. He took the cartridge out, blew it, and then put it back in, and that's it.
Do you know the reason why that happened is because this isn't the reason, but it happened at the same time, so I'm blaming it. Is that the barman came up to me and said, "Would I like a glass of wine?" So I think that was the internet's way of censoring alcohol from me.
Did you say yes?
No, I didn't. No, I just completely blanked him because I'm so interested in our conversation here, Joe.
No, he's ordered a double bourbon instead. So, given the timing of us recording this just being in the middle of September, I think it would be remiss if we didn't look at one of the Google elephants in the room, being the August core update. And there's been a lot of, I mean, with every Google core update or anytime Google sneezes, it's the shit put launch 1,000 blog posts every time. And there's been almost immediate analysis done, how it's reversed some of the helpful content things. But obviously, there's been the posts coming out actually, as I think it was Tom Capper on Moz actually outlining that most people don't understand what a helpful content actually was. So it's interesting to see how this is. I mean, some of my personal sites have been hit by it, some have increased by it. There's no rhyme or reason, I kind of guess, around that. Cindy, do you want to pick this up as a first topic?
Well, I was going to ask you, Dan, are you seeing sites that weren't hit by the original helpful content updates that are being hurt by this? Because I've seen one site like that. And so all the people that are cheering for the helpful content recovery, like, I'm on their side. That was, probably warranted. But at the same time, it's not just that. There's something else, or there's something additional happening, at least from what I'm seeing.
Yeah, I've seen multiple examples of. I mean, there's a site I posted a Href screenshot on LinkedIn the other day, which has probably been hit correlatively by every Google update for the past year and a half. This update is the first time it's kind of swung the other way, and that's just been from redoing some basics. But I've got some sites in my portfolio. I've got a couple of client sites which have seen increases or decreases which weren't affected by any updates in kind of the past year and a half either. So I agree, it's not just a helpful content reversal.
Yeah, so I think there's, it's the easy way to think of it as a rollback or a reversal, but I think that's actually probably not true. I think that whatever the selector or the selection mechanism was for the original helpful content updates has changed, and so a lot of things that were selected are no longer selected, and some things that weren't selected are selected. So it's not just it was this, now it's reversed. It's kind of a different criteria for are you affected, and it's probably a more generous criteria in many ways, but there's something that is less generous about it for some sites.
Yeah, and from what I mean, I've seen all the graphs on LinkedIn, on Twitter X, and all the rest of it, and there is the correlations, but the general theme is those which have seen reversals from helpful content update all seem to be talking about pruning that low value content, pruning different elements, actually increasing value propositions. And this speaks to a point you said earlier, Cindy, where with this srsltid parameter issue, if Google starts lowering the whatever scoring mechanism it wants to use for quality thresholds across pages, across a domain, and that affects that, that's a Google boo-boo that could impact websites negatively and cost revenue.
Yeah, definitely. I've always thought of helpful content in a similar vein as the Panda update, because Panda was a site-wide kind of throttling, and it was because of low site-wide quality. The average value of a page divided by the number of pages was not great, and so you got hit by Panda. And helpful content does seem to be the same, where pruning and consolidating is usually the answer, but you still have to wait for a new evaluation, a new core update to launch. And I think when they do these core updates, it's what's really important is the selector of, like, are you being, is this affecting you or not? Because it seems like in many ways it's not just a slow, decline after a core update. It's a noticeable, hard hit. Different from, updates of, my earlier days in SEO, where like it could be a slow burn or a fast burn sometimes.
I think I completely agree. There's so many comparisons to the Panda update, but then every time I always remember Panda, that for me was also a very misunderstood update. And the fact that from Panda it launched the whole 500 words a page minimum and all that, it kind of got over commoditized to a point where I think the actual point of it was missed. And yeah, I think with this, we risk as an industry looking at the core update like this and falling into that same oversimplification trap of, oh, it's just a reversal of helpful content, and going too far down that rabbit hole as opposed to actually like what the point of it actually was.
But also, I think in this, it's a great example, or at least talking about Panda and helpful content together. Like, it's a great example of Google trying to fix one problem by creating another, right? So they launched Panda, and we got rid of the thin content pages that were just a couple of sentences on a very narrow topic, and then we've gone to this back to super long form content. Where to be helpful, you have to cover the topic from every angle and have, quotes and all these other things, which can be good. But then that caused Google to have to break the pages down because it couldn't actually process those. So then we got to the point where we needed the passages / fraggles, and we needed to service things and now the AI has to break up pages, in an AI overview. They're like, this is about this topic, but this is kind of auxiliary and not important. So it's interesting, the ebbs and flows of all the technology.
Yeah, and I think, like it's the fixing one problem, creating another, then having to retroactively fix that problem by creating the first problem again, and it's this cyclical motion they have to go through. But it is what it is whilst SEO exists as a practice, because we're going to over-index on what works to a point of what we see working.
Once you turn a metric into a KPI, right? Or once you turn a measure into a metric, it becomes something that people are going to try and game, especially SEOs, because that's what we do.
Yeah, we love a good metric. Talking about metrics then, and how we potentially work in that way, I think it would be a good point whilst we have Alfie to touch on things like cookies, because Google's been ridiculous in talking about moving to like federated cohorts, or we're going to deprecate cookies, we're going to move to first party. And I think it was on an earlier episode, Cindy, you said that, oh, we've got through the DOJ thing now, we don't need this oh look, we're being a good Samaritan thing, and then they canned it immediately. How correlative that is. If you've not seen that episode of that Cindy theory, please check out the short. It is a very good theory. I think it's one hell of a rabbit hole we could probably record multiple episodes on its own. But Alfie, given the changes we've seen with cookies around this year, but obviously Google wanting to do federated cohorts, things like that, and now obviously sort of moves from KPIs, how are you seeing cookies potentially evolving for us as SEOs moving forward, or is it just going to be BAU?
Do you know, I don't think I know, because I don't think Google knows. And I think it's as simple as that. I think that they realized very quickly that they can't, the commercial impact of them pressing ahead with the deprecation of first party cookie would be too good for them. I think that the impact would be detrimental to them too much, and they didn't have a good enough workaround. I think combine that with what's been going on with the DOJ over in the States, I think they realise that they just don't need to put that as high up against the agenda. And I think that this leaves brands and businesses and websites in a really vulnerable state, because I think they don't know whether they're coming or going. So the organisations that I'm working with, it's very much a case of, we're grateful for BAU all the while it exists, but we recognise that this means that coming up with a viable alternative can be lower down our list, but we know it has opened our eyes to a need to get things back in our control and to be prepared for switches to flick really quickly. Would it surprise me if Google came back and said, well, in 90 days time, guess what, guys, we're going to go on like we were planning to? It wouldn't surprise me, because I think as soon as Google have a workaround, and as soon as it is politically useful for Google to look caring in that regard, then I think that they would. But right now they don't care because they don't need to. And I think it is just another great example of Google doing what Google want to do when it is useful for Google or not. I think it is as simple as that, if I'm perfectly honest. In terms of getting visibility on customer journeys, in terms of the use of cookies as a tool to collect data and to serve a purpose, I think that it is no bad thing for developers and for businesses to be looking for a smarter alternative. And I think that the use of systems more widely, in terms of, I'm seeing much closer integrations with booking systems and things in more intelligent ways. More intelligent APIs would probably be a good phrase to use. I think it is forcing software engineers to work more closely with website colleagues, and I don't think that's a bad thing, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. Jerry, you're usually quite close to the cookie conversation.
I still find it all a bit confusing that, nobody actually knows what cookies are, bar Alfie and Cindy and you and a couple of other people. You speak to people down the street and everybody kind of goes, I don't know what cookies are. Do I reject them? Do I accept them? I mean, I laughed about it on a previous episode that my TV started asking me, did I want cookies? And I'm like, it's a TV. I didn't actually know cookies existed on TV until relatively recently.
Jerry, sorry to interject, but if your fridge asks you if you'd like a cookie, it's usually asking about food, just so you know.
My fridge isn't smart enough to even keep my food cold at the moment. I think the idea of having a smart fridge, Dan and I work with somebody who does have a smart fridge. It's great. It plays music, but I don't think it does anything else. I think my problem basically is the fact that if we turn around and say, yes, we're going to get rid of cookies, we're going to replace it with something that's just equally privacy invading, and we're kind of doing this thing where we're like, cookies are evil, so we're going to replace it with something that you don't know anything about, because you don't know about cookies, you don't know they're good or bad, but we're going to replace it with something that's equally as bad or good or whatever, and you won't have any idea about it. It's a bit of a strange one. My biggest issue basically is the fact that when I did kind of look into that cookie issue on my TV, it then said it was going to share my viewing habits with 273 partners, and my brain just went, 200? Which 273 people are going to be interested in me watching X-Files every Tuesday? I don't like the fact. Go on.
Sorry, I was just going to say, this is a really interesting point, because your viewing history with certain broadcasters in the UK is already public information. They're already doing targeted TV advertising. We see that, have seen that for years with AdSmart from Sky. Yeah. Cookies are supposed to be, and this is why the EU legislates, this is opinion, but in my opinion, cookies are supposed to be the way for users to have an awareness of what's happening with their data. So it's supposed to circumvent things like targeted TV advertising based on viewing history, where you don't know it's happening. But I think everybody sees those annoying pop-ups, especially in the EU, where cookie or consent management platforms are so mandatory now and so important. But we still don't understand it. So it feels like this halfway house again between, exactly like you're saying, ignoring the big corporates doing things behind your back, but brands are still not doing it. We're only doing half a job. We're putting it in, but we're not educating. And I think that's so important the question is, should users assume that this is happening in things like TV advertising? We're getting targeted TV advertising because it's helpful and it's relevant and it's going to give us pet insurance because I have a pet, and so it's so important. Or should it be, is it more important to be able to go, actually, I don't want the websites I visited to be tracked, and so I don't want to see a targeted Facebook ad about pet insurance because I've got a new pet. It's the same thing, but two completely different ways of getting there, which is right, which is wrong, and which is expected.
See, the scary part is the fact that I'm a very boring person in a very boring country, and that's fine. But basically, in the US, it's kind of quite different. Almost, you're getting heavily manipulated and targeted by political parties. At least that was done by, surprisingly, a British company who got into a lot of trouble for it, who kind of figured out that they could do it through Facebook advertising and stuff. And I think basically that it's fine when it's pet insurance, because pet insurance is good if you've got a dog. It's a good thing. But when suddenly you find out you're being manipulated and you're being profiled, and they know that your gender, your sexuality, your political implications, and all of those kind of questions that make you, unique, but potentially at risk almost of being manipulated or targeted. That's when it kind of gets a bit weird for me.
But that's already happening, and that was happening before cookies as well. I think that the problem that we're dealing with, or what we're encountering now, is people didn't realize that was already happening, and now it's kind of becoming more in your face a little bit, or more provable. But I have a different take on all of the relationship between the outcome of the DOJ trial and cookies. My thought process here is the announcement that Google had that they're going to stop this quest to get rid of cookies happened, what, days after the findings in this most recent DOJ trial? And I think what happened is that for years, Google has been trying to say, trying to get rid of cookies and saying, we're working on it. It's just been delayed. We're pushing it back another year. We can't get, and they're so dependent on cookies, but they have built up a lot of technology, like the federated cohorts and journey tracking in organic, and tying the journey tracking to paid and organic. They're doing all these clever things in the background that are not cookies. They're more reliant on browser, like your specific browser history and your specific views that only Google knows, not third-party cookies, right? So it becomes a first-party cookie if you're doing it in Google. And so Google saw the opportunity to say, we can own all the cookies, and they're not called cookies anymore. We can own all the data and not share it with anyone else. So we're going to start grabbing all that data and keep it until we figure out what to do with it, until we absolutely need to get rid of cookies. And then we'll have all this data to target you, because we know not just that you have a new pet, but that, this and that, and that you're left-handed, and, all of these things. And then they wanted to have the edge when the world finally got rid of cookies. Then with this DOJ thing, they were like, we're going to be under some intense scrutiny for a while. And we were doing this shady stuff to hedge against the loss of cookies. Maybe everyone's gotten used to cookies, and let's just do cookies and maybe back off on some of the shadier data collection that we've been doing for years to prep for getting rid of cookies, because maybe cookies don't sound as bad anymore. That's the theory.
I have a question about your theory, Sydney, which is how could they ensure future proofing with all that historic data collection? Because surely that data has a shelf life, right? Whereas the idea is cookies don't have a shelf life.
So they make you opt into it. So in the EU about 4 or 5 months ago, everyone using a Google account had to click an opt-in button that said that they knew that Google shares all of it, that Alphabet shares its data across all the platforms, including Chrome and Gmail and Meet and all these things. So they remade you opt in to that. So I think that's part of it.
Nobody read that. Nobody even remembers clicking that button. Everybody went, click the button.
Right. I read all of the terms and conditions.
Human beings who
that is slander. That is slander.
Okay, my point is that most people will just, as soon as it's there's a button which will stop you from getting to your whichever website you're going to, Dan, your favorite website, the sausage website, you're trying to load up your favorite sausage website, and there's a button which says, do you opt in? Yes, I do. Yes, just give me my sausages.
Just for some wider context here, a few years ago, I was working with a client who did food box deliveries, and I realized very quickly, if you ran any kind of website that did food reviews, companies would send you free stuff. So I made a website which was called Sausage King, from the Ferris Bueller thing, Sausage King of Chicago, whatever. It had a logo done on Fiverr, and it got a lot of free stuff sent, and I had a lot of good barbecues that summer. It doesn't exist anymore because the bubble burst, but that's what Jerry means when he talks about my sausage website, basically.
My point is that for a human being who isn't actually technically nerdy on the internet, we just are so used to just clicking accept. Yes, go for it. I mean, I think, was it in Cloudflare that they hid something which was, about the zombie apocalypse and what they could do, and nobody ever read that part of the terms and conditions except one lawyer who found out that there was a whole paragraph about the zombie apocalypse in the, I'm going to say it's the Cloudflare terms and conditions, but we never read anything. And I mean, that recent Disney case is hilarious, where somebody basically said that because they'd signed up for Disney Plus, they couldn't sue them I mean, I say hilarious, somebody died, but so it's not that funny, but you know what I mean. Basically, it's so bad that it's funny. It's that kind of crazy world that we live in, where terms and conditions are something that we're so used to just click and accept on. We haven't got time to read the terms and conditions of every website, every service, everything that we click into. We should be able to trust that the companies that we interact with aren't evil.
But they are. I mean, they're money motivated. And like, I just want to clarify too, it's not just the cookies that are the problem, the listening apps, for instance. So this has been proven out that our apps are actually listening to us using the microphone.
Yes.
And they're very smart marketers who've recently told me, like, oh no, that was just the algorithms being good at aggregating your search history. No, like, they're good at aggregating your search history, but they're also listening, and they're selling what they learn in the listening to other companies. And so the companies, when they're this is all financially motivated, and there's not a lot of oversight here, and the oversight that's there is not technical enough to know or even like imagine what could be going on. Like, they wouldn't even imagine that they're using the mic for something other than, asking Siri for driving directions.
Have you just triggered everybody's Siri?
Not mine, because I don't use inferior Apple products. So I kind of guess that gives us Jerry's now typing something mean in the private chat, isn't he? He has, very funny. Okay, Google, turn off the lights. You think I have a smart home? I don't. So I kind of guess, just as that brings us to about 35-40 minutes into this, now's probably a good time to kind of wrap up. Does anyone have any other pressing thoughts they want to leave the long-suffering audience with, who've been with us for the past 37 minutes?
I have a closing question for our long-suffering audience to go and suffer thinking about, which is, what is expected versus what is the expected behavior of these companies? Is it expected and is it appropriate for them to be listening to microphones, or is it something that we need to take a stand against? And if it is something we take a stand against, how do we do it? And I think it's time for us as an industry to step back. When I say us, I mean data, SEO, tech, marketing, everyone, to understand and realign on what is expected intrusive behavior and what is not, and how we educate and how we get not just consent but actually understood, informed consent as well. I think that is the big picture question that sounds vague but is really important right now.
Well, but Alfie, who is the right regulator in this case? Like, if we were to do something, who would enforce it? Because the internet by design is border free. Like, we're all, like, you guys are all in the UK, but I'm not. So, like, are you guys protected, but I'm not? And who?
These are all things, right? These are all things. We look at the European Charter of Human Rights, the ECHR, right, which is something that is under massive political conversation in the UK at the moment, because should we leave it, should we not? Well, that is again a borderless attempt at providing human rights. So if we're considering leaving that, then is that even going to help for this digital regulation? Who knows? And I'm not saying I have the answer, but I think it is something we really have to think about, because it's becoming more and more important, and especially as people start to grow up without.
One of the things I would say though is I'm gonna jump in here just because Alfie's having police issues. But just to kind of go back a step, I mean, we also like the conversations with TikTok and the courts or whoever it was. But basically, it's the case that a lot of the kind of more senior rule makers don't understand the internet. And I've been in lots of situations where I've read through legal cases where I'm like, that's why somebody's suing somebody because they didn't understand how Google works. It's bizarre, basically, that, you know, the people that are going to be making the rules are politicians who are so old that, you know, they're still trying to use their Nokia 6210 and are unsure as to how Wi-Fi is connected. My point is that, you know, if we're going to get somebody to kind of decide how it should work, they should actually understand it. And I think that actually 15-year-olds at the moment have a better understanding of how privacy is implied and what they should and shouldn't share versus, you know, the guy that that tweeted his name and one time and it became an internet phenomenon.
And actually, Jerry, that is so important because I completely agree with you. I think the 15-year-olds do have the best understanding compared to 60-year-olds. But I think that the current 5-year-olds, as they grow up, if we don't do a good enough job of educating and informing how this works, it's going to be too late. And they don't know what's happening to their data and they don't know how it's working. So I think there's this real time-sensitive window at the moment to make sure that we get those foundations around education, around principles, around consent, right?
I agree completely.
Otherwise we'll become lazy, and that's the blunt way of putting it. You know, we will become. We talk in purchasing. Everybody talks about being an informed buyer, know the service you're getting, know what product you're buying, etc. We have a finite window here where some users are informed users, and I see that cohort getting smaller and smaller as time goes on if we're not careful.
I think on that note, as Alfie's internet appears to be going even more down the drain, it might be a good time to kind of wrap things up. I want to thank everyone for sticking with us for the last 40 minutes, and I hope you're enjoying this series that we're kind of ad hoc recording and putting together. Myself, Jerry, Cindy, and other guests. If you'd like to be a part of this, you can reach out to me by Twitter, LinkedIn. I'm on pretty much every SEO Slack group going as well, including Noah's fantastic one at the moment. And yeah, please do answer Alfie's question down in the comments. All of the questions, which were in that single question. And yeah, let us know your thoughts. Yeah, if you like this episode, I'm showing his age calling it Twitter. I'm going to have to turn this private chat off we've got here, Jerry. It just feels weird calling it X or X Twitter or whatever.
I know. Yep. It's just very weird how that's the worst rebrand ever.
I don't know. I still think Marathon Bars moving to Snickers was a pretty bad rebrand, but that nothing. Marathon's good. So on that note, thank you very much for watching. Please do subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see any further videos on this or see any of the shorts that come out of this. And we look forward to you joining us in the next one. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on. Cheers, guys.